Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am Dr. Primrose ZJ Bima and I post content about research, career development and wellness. In today's episode, I'll be speaking to you about a subject that is very close to my heart, perhaps a topic that is sensitive for me at this moment in time, but I'm a typical end of year girl. You know, in November and December, I'm always checking what did I do, what did I not do, what worked, what didn't work, and what shall I do moving forward. So I hope that this is one that resonates with people that love going back to the drawing board every now and again and checking back on their goals versus the reality. It is also an insightful video, I feel, for people that have been thinking about pivoting in their careers or people that are feeling frustrated or stuck in any line of their career pathway, because this, of course, is not a situation or an experience that is peculiar to academia. So for context, for some of you, I will have to repeat this if you already know, but in case you've forgotten or in case you're new to this channel, I hold a PhD in political studies, a master's in international relations, honors in gender and transformation, and a bachelor of social science, where I specialize in international relations, gender studies, as well as public administration. And personally, I identify as an African feminist political scholar who writes articles on African politics, international relations, and the role of women in politics and international relations. So I have, done so much over the past few years. After graduating with my PhD in 2021, I did a postdoctoral research fellowship in African politics at the University of Cape Town. And then 2023 and 2024, I was busy with a postdoctoral research fellowship which looked at gender justice and transformation in universities at Stellenbosch University. So I've been able to pursue subjects that are very close to my heart. I was fortunate enough to have parents that were able to fund my fees from as early as primary school through to varsity, master's level, and I did have a PhD scholarship to support me to get a PhD. This was very important because I knew that I wanted a PhD from as early as the age of 15. So many thanks to God, His grace, and pushing me and giving me the required skills and talent, amongst so much more blessings that He provided over the time for me to be able to get here. And so today I see myself nearing the end of a postdoc at Stellenbosch University. I have been postdocing for 3 years, having done a PhD in 3 years. So for me, that's the number one frustration point. The reality in academia is that over 50% of people that graduate with PhDs never get to stay in universities as lecturers, senior lecturers, and then becoming professors. And so that's a reality that I had awareness of. But because, of course, I'm a high flyer and I always believe that I'm a cut above the rest, I saw myself being able to navigate the system and eventually becoming an academic within the system. However, I have experienced academic precarity, which I'll explain soon. When you look at postdoctoral research fellowships, these are positions where you are neither a student nor a full-time academic. And most of us are not protected by a wide range of rights within universities. You pay for your own medical aid, I guess it comes from your research funds. And it also means that you can't get, loans, funeral cover, and a wide range of protections that you require. And more often than not, your timeline is based on the university calendar. There are very few leave days, and you're highly encouraged not to take, kinds of leave, for example, like maternity leave, because of course, if you're on a 2-year contract, if you leave by the time you come back, you might actually have to just finish off the postdoc or pay back the money. And also, what happens with postdocs is that there's so many postdocs in systems. And I believe that while your survival relies on publishing or perishing, you have to publish journal articles, book chapters, books, whatever else is required of you, go to conferences, present at seminars, webinars, and, manage workshops, supervise students. All that is academic experience. However, because you're not a permanent staff member, for example, in my case, for the most part, I was acknowledged as a reader of master's dissertations as opposed to a supervisor, because a supervisor is supposed to be a fully fledged academic within the institution. And then The other challenge is that you realize that sometimes you can't take on particular passion projects, for example, supervision of PhDs, because they're likely going to stay in the system for 3 years. Your contract is only 1 year or 6 months or like 2 years. So that's the precarity I was talking about, that there is no definite condition that says that you will be in the system or you are granted, another 3 or 4 years within the system. And also, even if that condition existed for postdocs, it is dangerous to stay in that position for the longest time. I think in the institutions where I've been based, postdocs earn, at least a third of what a full-time lecturer would be earning per month. So that already for me spells underemployment. They could argue that, you're not a full-time staff member. And so because of the absence of that permanent salaried position, then they can't exactly pay you more. So I understand that, but it means that doing that for 3 years has been counterproductive. I have been able to submit, of course, to prevent publish or perish, but the proof of payment that comes to me in terms of what I am paid for my worth, I feel that it is quite low. Let me just say that I've realized that being in academia really helped me. I've grown, particularly in terms of becoming an independent researcher. I've worked with a wide range of academics. I've been exposed to different scholars, not only through their writings, but through dialogues with them. And I've been able to exchange and create knowledge with younger scholars, masters, honors, undergraduate students. And for me, that really fulfilled me, because I came to realize, in my early 20s, that I was a teacher at heart, and I also loved co-creating knowledge. So I really found those experiences enriching, and that's probably one of the reasons why I kept holding on to academia and I kept the hope. So I feel also that it helped me to give back. There are people that nurtured me as a young scholar, and I was able to do the same to other young scholars. However, there's a reality check that needs to happen. I'm a 32-year-old, swiftly approaching 33. I need sustainable feeding, accommodation, health, and, provisions for my family, in addition, of course, to providing for myself. And I need certainty in my life. Precarity is a challenge that, has exposed me to a lot, and realizing that I could be in a permanent state of impermanence really does hurt me. And I've realized that there are other ways in which I can actually try and pursue my interest, whether within or outside academia. So by within, I'm facing the reality that, if I see an opportunity, I'll apply for it. I'm called upon for an opportunity to go and teach, whether temporarily, a whole course or maybe just a section. I'm more than willing to do that, because I believe that I'm a lecturer for life. So I do have reservations, though, when it comes to ad hoc appointments, because it can also become a trap on its own. What is happening here is that people value your work and they're interested in you adding value to their curricula, but they're doing so on a very temporary basis, and the payment is temporary, it's once off, it's short-term contracts, and then you still have to find ways of structuring your life. And also, teaching takes a lot of time. The research that goes behind it, the time in class, the marking and what have you. And so people often joke about how academia in general, does underpay, even if you get paid a lot, because the work that goes in is actually quite a lot. And I can attest to that because, of course, I've tutored, I've been a teaching assistant, and I've also lectured. So I've also thought about the reality of needing to reskill. I don't necessarily want to view it as upskilling, because I feel like upskilling is maybe adding the next best skill in your particular career line. But reskilling can entail trying to get skills that are required in the world or that are required for you to pivot into a new sector. So what I've realized also is the reality that if you want to pivot or move, you need to have a game plan. I think I tried to create one. It might not have been the best, but it has definitely helped me as I moan and grieve this reality that I have to leave academia, to create timelines, to develop scenarios, and to also to be daring, to shift. So in terms of timelines, I think always think about what's happening in the workspace where you're at. Are you happy in your position? And what does the future hold? Do they guarantee you a renewal? Does that mean at the end of the contract, it's all over? And also when the contract ends, do you want to ask for a renewal, or you would rather look for something else? So do that. And I think for a postdoc, I don't think anyone has any business doing a postdoc for more than 3 years. Maybe I'm capping at 3 years because of my personal experience, but I do think that based on the life realities I mentioned, particularly in relation to money and career growth, you definitely need to shift early enough. Otherwise, you're going to have so many publications, to prevent publish or perish, but your proofs of payment are, very little money, and you're just surviving on the barest minimum. So in addition to timelines, looking at reality also creates different scenarios. Okay, I wanted to work an academic job in academia, but this is not working. Are there any academic alternatives? So I spoke about being ad hoc, but also that exposes you to precarity. But what's nice about just teaching ad hoc is that there is no implied requirement for you to be publishing alongside the teaching. So what that does is that it gives you more time to pursue other interests or other career objectives without the burden of proving that, you're publishing and then, the threat of perishing within academia because you haven't published. Think about non-academic scenarios. How can I use my skills? So personally, I had the benefit that before my PhD, when I was doing my master's, I decided that I needed work experience. So I gained work experience by doing a wide range of internships, unpaid for the most part, and also working as a regional analyst on African politics with a particular focus on Southern Africa. I worked in diplomacy, so I had that confidence that I can always become a policy researcher. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going back to those particular organizations, but I think it helped me to remind myself that my skills are transferable. Although, of course, when you move into any different sector, you have to write based on the conventions required there, be it journalism, be it government, be it in an international organization and whatnot. So you have to be ready to unlearn and then learn what is required wherever you go. And I think that is very important. And you might have to forego having your name always as author, because I think for me, that was the biggest obsession. I was like, I'm leaving government where my reports don't have my name on them. Now I'm going to be in academia where I'm going to be referenced and cited. But I feel that right now, people citing Lima 2024, 2025 is the list of my interests or expectations. Although I know that it is important, it has academic street credit. But I feel that I will gain fulfillment from knowing that I contributed to report writing or to writing different types of articles that still go out into different, sectors, into different parts of society, get read and get included, whether in policy making processes or whatever change that it is that needs to be made in the world. So a third one, which is a hard one for me, is you are another scenario. What would you do to shelter or proof yourself from complete unemployment or from this underemployment that I've been explaining, this near exploitation that happens, in all sectors, including academia? So this one, I think, needs one to be very strategic. I have had to rely on myself by force in some moments in my career pathway. For example, after my master's, I ended up being, an editor full time because I was at home unemployed, and the only way I could actually make money, based on how creative I was at the time with my skills, was becoming an editor. However, I've grown over the years. Since 2017, I went into research consulting, an area that I felt was important but required so much of my time. Trust me, editing actually requires much more time, and it's an area that I'm currently not intending to go into on a full-time basis. So this year I spent, the better part of my free time, if such exists in academia, working with people who are in civil society organizations, working with people that are running projects that are aligned to politics, but in the corporate sector, and just learning how they do the work they do. And I also earned whilst doing it, volunteered to be a rapporteur at an event volunteer to help people set up a project, volunteer to help people to engage in a particular dialogue that requires insights from an African woman or from someone with gender perspectives or with expertise in politics. Doing all that, I was able to utilize the knowledge from my long submitted thesis, particularly in relation to elections, and realize that elections are here to stay as long as we, hype up this idea that electoral democracies are the in thing, that they should be the way in which we select our politicians and our leaders. I believe that I can actually make a living out of it, although it means that I might not be employed by someone. So I've been now, doing so much more deliberate work in the line of what can I do if I am to develop into a consultant, a thriving consultant, a not broke consultant? And so I think one of the key issues is do save money. Yes, it's a struggle. I already mentioned that postdoc money is very little, so you have to find ways of navigating how to live within those particular means and also how else to earn money. So if you've got side hustles like teaching on the side, editing, research consultancy, make sure you forget that that money is actually coming. So spend what's coming from the main hustle, what you're being paid for as a postdoc, for example, or whatever day job you currently hold, and then make the money from the other gigs, your investment into yourself. So find out what you need to start this new business or this new enterprise. This can include tools like, cameras, laptops, whatever the case may be. In my case, if I want to go bigger with content creation, it might require me to create a studio or to book studio time, whatever the case may be. So I think that in creating that scenario of what can you do for you, you need to be very deliberate. Maybe it just means you're going to be buying vehicles. Maybe you've decided to go into a business that requires you to have business model where you've got vehicles on the road. Maybe it's Uber, maybe it's Bolt, maybe you're running a tourism sort of like company. But whatever it is, try and get a budget for it. If you're in a country where maybe your citizenship and other benefits that you hold currently allow you to actually get a loan, maybe go for that. But obviously you need a financial advisor who takes you through the risks and, the perks of doing what you need to be doing. So dare to shift. That's my last point for today. It's a message to myself, and it's also a call to action to anyone who is feeling stifled, feeling stuck, or realizing that staying in the position where you're at right now is going to lead you perhaps not to where you wanted to be. Be realistic. I've already mentioned the statistics. And oftentimes people who are overachievers like myself, you're like, yeah, but I'm going to be part of the 40% or 30% that is fortunate. Yes, but entry into so many positions is regulated by more than just the job requirements that people post when they advertise a job. Sometimes people just don't have the funds to recruit someone. Sometimes people just don't like your personality for whatever reason, despite the credit you bring to them in terms of publishing a lot, in terms of teaching and being loved by students. And sometimes I believe that, we live in a world that is very spiritual, and also there's the idea of destinies. Maybe what you think is for you or was for you is actually not for you, and God wants you to push harder or to go elsewhere, or maybe God wants to redirect you to go somewhere else before you eventually come back. So those points obviously are now based on like your personal journey, your personal experiences. But I believe that as human adults, one way to actually try and future-proof for yourself is to create scenarios and let that list of scenarios have a scenario where you ask yourself, what am I going to do for me? And choose to do something that is for you. And I do think that even in the event that you have an academic role or a non-academic role and it pays you well, you always have to think about other ways of gaining an income, other ways of securing your future, and other ways of putting yourself in a situation where you just have to be running something, managing something. And that's a project you could pass on to future generations. That's a project that you could use to expand beyond academia, because academia is a lot of theory. Yes, it involves a lot of training and getting inspiration and insights from different sectors, but to a larger extent, it lacks the practicality that is required to make real world changes. I speak here obviously in relation to the social sciences where I am based. So go for the most, push to the limits. The reality is you're gonna be scared. I'm trembling right now. My voice, my mind, and I'm like, are you sure you're telling people this? Are you gonna do it as well? So yeah, I think let's just do what we can. And yes, hope on its own is not a strategy, but hope with a plan, and hope with scenarios, and hope with, the push to just dare to shift if things don't work in one sector or in one organization or another is what you need, is what you need right now. And of course, don't forget your God. If you're religious, take it to the Lord in prayer. Tell him how things are going. Tell him how you wish things would be going. And also just look up to him for guidance, because God does provide guidance and God does provide solace in multiple situations. And God does create destiny helpers when you need people to help you navigate these challenges. I have experiences, but this is not a time for testimonies. But also just make sure that you align with yourself with people that are where you want to be, or people that are going where you want to be. So strategically networking by attending events, workshops, conferences, what have you, and making sure you get the most out of it by engaging in ways that enrich your future, but also, share your own stories so that people can also learn from you, because dialogues are supposed to go in both ways, or like cyclically. Now I'm chopping English. Yeah, if you're like in a round table or workshop scenario. That's all I have to say for today. And I wish you all the best in your endeavors. And I will see you in the next video, and take care until then. Bye.